Alright, welcome to the first of hopefully many videos to come, recapping a given month for gaming. The whole point of this is to give myself something of a digital diary, where I can creatively express myself through video creation about game. What this is going to entail is not really reviews of games, but a gathering of my thoughts surrounding them. So that can include thinkings, feelings, maybe connections I have, or I'm hoping to really limit it, but maybe some critiques, just whatever I deem important to express about my experience while playing it. The genesis of this idea actually came from my career, which requires me to self-reflect on strengths, growths, future considerations daily and very frequently. So what better way of doing that and to improve in that area than to implement it in other areas of my life too. I chose gaming because it's easily my longest standing hobby and how I enjoy spending some of my relaxing time at home. With that said, I've started to notice that as I'm getting older, it's becoming less fulfilling to just sit and play something thoughtlessly. Which, don't get me wrong, I still find gaming to be super fun and enjoy the time I do get to play, but again, that timing element has gotten increasingly more difficult. So when I do get a chance to play something, I really want to immerse myself and think about what I'm consuming while I'm playing it and even after I'm done. Additionally, creating videos is something I've wanted to do for a long time. I've been telling myself for years to start, and I've always made an excuse as to why I couldn't. Whether it be timing with school, work is too draining, or things that need to be done around our place, just blah blah blah, like shut up dude, just do it. So this is going to be attempt number 2, because I tried a preliminary attempt in January and it died due to frustration. So without further ado, this has been my February for gaming. Inertial Drift is a game that I played in its launch year 2020, and I put it down fairly quickly Toy Story style. I remember it having a fun gameplay loop, but overall left me feeling like the embodiment of a shrug. Knowing February was going to be a busy month for life, I thought, instead of starting something brand new, I'll jump into a game that I felt could use a re-return to. So game number 1 for February was Inertial Drift. Before jumping into my thoughts on it, I want to say off the top that I'm a huge car person. But due to circumstances in life, I had to sell my fun car in 2021 and I haven't had another one since. Car games have been the way that I get that driving feel and scratch the car itch, even if they are completely unrealistic, like a lot of the games that I'll be talking about. Additionally, Forza 6 was just announced in late January, so with that excitement fresh in my mind, I was looking for a car game to jump into. And what led me to Inertial Drift was the menial 2 hours of playtime. 2 hours is an okay amount of time by Steam's refund metric, but truly a game needs more time to flourish into something you can really love. I was hoping that returning to it may help me find that newfound love for it, or just a new appreciation. Immediately I remembered how awesome it felt to play. The game is a twin stick racer, left stick controlling the steering direction, and right stick controlling your drift, which is effectively just the back end of the car. And boy, when I tell you, I was having a great time in those first few races. Throwing the back end in each direction, defying any possible connection to driving reality, taking insane angles around the corners. It's really fun, and it's super funny seeing it snap back and forth crazy style. Which, for an arcadey style racing game, it's exactly what I'm looking for. A consistent feeling from start to finish, knowing the car will do this when I input this. Precisely why those initial hours felt so good to me. Throttle control is fairly precise, and drift angles feel infinitely adjustable. Place that amount of control in a timed setting, it practically feels like they're goading you to beat your own time every single lap. But that's only the first couple of cars I came to find out. The way they increase difficulty is, in my own accounts, just making the game feel clunkier to play and drastically changing the gameplay style entirely. Those first few cars feel insanely loose, but still so fun to throw around and learn to control. The later cars are touted and titled as technical, but fundamentally, they completely change how you've learned to drive in the game. Approaching your drift, you can no longer use the same strategy, but you also have to learn an entirely new way of drifting and holding that angle. In the case of the final story car, I literally couldn't figure out the proper way of drifting for a long time. In turn, it became less about beating my times and instead fighting the controls to do what I want. It honestly felt pretty bad and reminded me why I didn't go deeper into the game. What made it fun at its core is lost in those later cars, which sucks because, the later cars are usually cooler cars. I will add a caveat though, that I did only do the story mode for this reason. I wasn't exactly attracted to the extras because it's pretty much just a global leaderboard for the story stuff and the story tracks. And like I said, I don't want this to be a criticism on the game because there's a lot to enjoy in it. Most prolifically to me are the visuals because they are awesome and I think they're very well done. It's a beautiful blend of uniqueness through the art, but it's grounded in the reality of having the settings and, more importantly to me, the cars. The game being named Inertial Drift is pretty sure a playoff initial D if I were to guess, so I was excited to see what cars they brought in and put their unique spin on. It's such a minor detail, but for somebody who really enjoys cars, it's fun to recognize the bones or the frame that they're referencing and extrapolating what that looks like in a real life counterpart. As a final point, I want to briefly mention the story, if you want to call it that. Driving games are hand feel first and story any way they could fit it in much later on. Overall, I'm glad I came back to it. It reminded me of the fun I had while showing me why it will never be a time sink game for me. Another racing game I played a bit in February is Super Woden Rally Edge. I wasn't familiar with the Super Woden racing series as a whole, but there's a few YouTube channels that I watch on occasion that have recommended it before it was even released, touting its excellent controls and fun as a whole package. I'm only about 3 hours in at the time of this recording, which is a pretty good amount of game. It certainly gives you a good understanding of the game feel, but it doesn't crest the potential I think that later on I would feel maybe with faster cars or different groups of racing, yada yada. But with that said, I have been enjoying my experience with it so far. Like I talked about a bit with Inertial Drift, arcade racers to me need to set the handling expectations early and give you a good feel from the get-go. I need it to be consistent throughout the entire game and the difficulty to be scaled organically. This game is one of those instances where they got it so right. The driving feels completely consistent across the two driving classes I've played with so far. The handling is very predictable regardless of the car, making the content it's based around feel like the actual challenge they want you to focus on. That content being rally racing. For the uninitiated, rally racing takes place on pretty much any surface with quite a bit of elevation change throughout the race, making it a battle against the road conditions and the clock rather than other drivers. I am no expert on these things. That is just my understanding of it. So while that is the primary racing, I really enjoyed the alternate racing formats they had in the game as well. The head-to-head mode brought a lot more competitive edge to it, and the Gymkhana let those high-revving rally cars display their full capabilities in a completely different format, which is what makes rally cars the absolute coolest to me. With rally cars, these things seem to spec into pretty much everything very well from the get-go, which plays really nice of the strength of racing the conditions of the road rather than the car. That is, finding a racing line that suits the current racing conditions rather than finding the static data showing the optimal line that works for said track. But what really sold me on this game outside of the handling is the vibe they cultivate through audio and visual. What's more is the experience isn't just held to the actual racing gameplay. Mucking about in the menus fits so well with what they're trying to get you to experience. Upgrading your car is super fun to play around with. Your car gets lifted up. You don't actually see any of the parts being changed, but the animation is super fun. Kind of novelty, but I've enjoyed it every single time. Customizing, while it's pretty limited to just the colors and the wheels, having options at all is honestly sufficient for a game of this size. Even unlocking new vehicles or rewards from the race is so stylized. Having a pan, the big truck with Vegeta written on the side, seeing the car come down while poppers are going off, it's really fun. The entire package, as I've been alluding to, is so complete. I love a game that nails exactly what they set out to do. Something I didn't even do early on was go into the settings while actually in the race to see, but there's different filters that you can apply to the screen to really fit what you are trying to do. To summarize my feelings in one sentiment, Rally Edge feels like an arcade cabinet brought to a home experience. The retro style experience they set out to create feels awesome to play within. Every time I boot the game up to play it, it feels steeped in the nostalgic feeling of walking up to an arcade cabinet, throwing in the coins and trying to get that top spot on the leaderboard. Again, immaculate vibes.
Have a good shift.
Bro, you're so lucky.
I know.
Now this game wasn't initially in my immediate backlog, but got bumped up for 3 reasons in particular. Number 1, it had incredibly high praise from everywhere online for its story. I'm fairly cautious about believing the internet, especially when it comes to games, but a trusted person completed and shared a similar sentiment to a lot of the reviews I was reading, so in my mind it added some validity to those claims to fame. The same person who played it is luckily part of my Steam family, so there was literally 0 barrier of entry, which is enticing in its own regard. That person also drew me in with promises of a telltale style narrative and relationship building, and that is my personal favorite kind. While I'm not the biggest fan of using other games as analogs for descriptors, I understand the nature of why it's done. If I was told the game was more like Disco Elysium, I probably wouldn't have jumped to play it as soon as I did, which is nothing against Disco, just wasn't my cup of tea for gaming at that time. What's more was I was doing research and I found out that Ad Hoc is a studio pretty much comprised of people who worked on or at Telltale games. So it makes a lot of sense that a lot of these kind of elements made it into this. So I'll be talking about the story, the gameplay, and the characters. I'll not be spoiling, or I'm gonna try not to spoil anything directly, so don't worry. Hopefully the visuals keep that vision alive. So the story, because I don't want to actually spoil the story itself, I personally thought it was fairly generic. The story is pretty basic and predictable in my opinion, but what makes it stand apart from the other iterations lives in how the characters intermingle so closely with the story itself. None of the characters you're introduced to formally feel tertiary to the plot. They literally all play some sort of role in the game. It sounds like a lot to take on and think about, but in reality, the game caters to it really well. The interactions feel very genuine, and it's a game where I'm surprised to say that your decisions actually feel like they do make a difference later on. So much so that when my partner and I went through the game entirely through a second time, making completely different decisions, we saw completely different cutscenes and parts of the original playthrough that were altered by those choices that we are making in the second playthrough. There were of course forced canon events, but even during those scenes you can make alternate choices, and that resulted in a deviation of your path, even if it was ever so slight. If it didn't affect it immediately, the results would certainly show at some point in the future, which kind of feels weird to say out loud because it's not really groundbreaking to say. It's like, wow, your cutscenes affected the gameplay? Alright, and what? I would say yes and no to that. What I mean is, because you're effectively playing the cutscenes, you're molding the scene for your gameplay later on, which feels awesome to interact with, so I think it's huge kudos to them. I'm also briefly going to discuss just the relationships, because I think it's a major theme in the game, because the game is effectively about relationships and their significance in our lives. The relationships are at the core of the story. Because you spend so much intimate time with them through every part of the game, you start to connect to them heavily, forming bonds with some over others and having to make really difficult decisions, just as life presents us so often. How they connect that to the gameplay is honestly masterful. That is, the way the story functions make you decide how important different characters are to you. How they interact with you will largely be on you as the player to figure out, and trust me when I say, they make it hard for you to make some of those decisions. It's by far one of the best examples of the butterfly effect in action for a narrative game. The gameplay. So let's talk about the gameplay itself. Unlike Telltale narratives, you're not really walking around at all, but as the title implies, you're a hero dispatcher, which sounds mundane, but they did a really good job of tying in the relationships, characters, and dynamics to build upon the world you're playing in. Again, it doesn't sound groundbreaking, but adds to the story narrative of everyone here matters. You're understanding some of their motives through the gameplay. You get a feeling for who they are as a character and how they hold themselves and the role they play in this world that you're creating. While you go through the game, they give you even more autonomy by choosing how they'll aid your team through leveling up attributes. Those attributes, which are formally called in-game hero stats, differ based on the character and will affect your choices as a dispatcher to send them on certain calls. What's more on this is they never outright tell you what attributes they're looking for. It's up to you as the dispatcher to figure that out. I know it sounds really basic, but everything works together just it's so coherent. It's like a really good, well put together package. Adding on to that element, you can attend things like training sessions where heroes can get new abilities. You're going to have to pair up people to hit different synergies or utilize their skills, which are completely blank until you figure them out. It honestly surprised me quite a bit how many gameplay systems they have in it for the nature of the game, and typically within these kind of games I don't feel like you see this many kind of systems. Oh, and I can't forget the best part, the gambling portion. They show you a percentage, display a visual aid to understand that percentage, and roll that dice. Post game I realized it was much more like a D&D, which should have been made obvious by the Critical Role title card in the boot up sequence, but obviously these are only starting to hit my brain. Post game thoughts. Finally, and I would probably say most contentiously, are the characters. The characters are the final portion I want to briefly touch on, because holy man, did they ever go crazy in like the best ways possible. The amount of life breathing through every character is honestly astonishing. It's brought to justice through incredible voice acting too by most people. For spoiler's sake, I probably won't go deep into all of them, but there are two that I want to exemplify because I think they represent either end of the spectrum, which is Robert Robertson, the main character, and the hero Phenomenon. For me personally, Robert actually kind of fell flat. I thought he was too generic and single-noted. I think the story that they're weaving through his journey that you're taking on as him was incredible, but I just could not feel a lot towards him. And it's clear there's reasons for the way that he's speaking and the way that he is, but I couldn't find a connection to it. It just didn't feel great. And I'd honestly attribute that a lot to Aaron Paul's voice acting, or maybe it was the dialogue that he was given through it, because I think he does have depth, but it feels like it wasn't used to its full potential throughout the game. Like I mentioned earlier, contrasted to that, in my opinion, is Phenomenon, which was easily one of my favorite characters, and just such an awesome take on a super being. What really stood out about him to me was his awareness of being someone so foreign to Earth that he has a lot of troubles interacting as a person on Earth. He knows he's different despite looking the same, at least visually, but it's an aspect of outer worldly beings that I've always wondered about. How can these beings be so normal? How do they understand the nuance of being human so well, despite being completely foreign to the world itself? And honestly, Phenomenon validated a lot of those exact questions. What I mean by that is he has very little knowledge of people, and he's learning to navigate the emotional complexity that literally makes us human, which is a fun journey to be on. You're literally watching him try and grasp and understand emotion like a child, but in the form of an adult person. I'm sure there's some kind of analysis that could be done on that point alone, but for now I'm just going to be completely leaving that alone. Overall, the game felt like a really good modernization on that Telltale formula I love so much. I really hope that this iteration of the company can stick around, because more games like this would feel so much more engaging to play as a narrative, opposed to just being, picking things up and hit the QTE. This is one of those games where I was seeing awards and different things pop up for it as it was releasing, and obviously it wasn't that long ago, but now having the retrospect of playing the game, I can see why there was so much buzz around it, because it truly is an incredible game. So that was my February for gaming. On a more meta note, I hope this has been enjoyable to listen to, if there's anyone listening to this at all. This is literally my first attempt at creating something like this. Other than that January video that died, it's going to be a learning process of finding out what I really enjoy and how I can build upon the things that I do enjoy about it. Even just being able to voice opinions that aren't terrible, it'll be a learning process of kind of understanding how to form that into a better, not even review, because I really don't want this to be a review, but having it be something that I want to look back at and listen and think about for these games that I've been playing. Like I said, I do want to do more of these in the future, and I actually want to make more in-depth content on certain games that I've really enjoyed playing, but I really do not want it to be a video game essay that's like 40 minutes long, because one, I just don't think I am going to watch that in the future full through. And I really want this to be a condensed, not summary, but a way of kind of bringing it full circle after playing a game and having all those thoughts be just kind of here. And like I said, this is of course primarily a digital diary first and foremost. So I hope by getting my thoughts out in this format, it will help me enjoy games more. That is my hope, obviously, but I guess we'll see. So if you did happen across this, thank you for watching or listening to my month in gaming. Until the next one, see you friends.